everybody, my name is Derek Simon, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about fair odds because I think there's a lot of confusion as to what fair odds really are. I know when I used to handicap, and probably a lot of you can relate to me, I used to just star the horses I liked, or put a line next to the horses I liked, a check mark maybe, and I would just cross out the horses I didn't like. Well, did that mean that the horses I crossed out had a 0% chance of winning, and the horses that I liked all had an equal chance of winning? Of course not. But a lot of times, even people who consider themselves to be value bettors, what they're really doing is looking for a price they would like or accept on the horses that they prefer. In other words, I like horse number A, or horse number 1, number 2, whatever, and I'm going to bet this horse if I get 3-to-1 odds. Well, that's great, but what are the studies? Where's the backup data that shows that you're profitable when you insist on minimum odds? I'm guessing most players don't do that. And that is the difference between a fair odds line, because ideally, I'm not saying that most people who create fair odds lines actually do this, but ideally there should be some data to support the fact that your winning percentage and your ROI doesn't go south when you start insisting on minimum odds. You know, Ray Talbot of the American Turf Monthly used to do this a lot. It used to drive me nuts. He'd have a system, it would hit 20%, so he would say, hey, we're going to bet these horses if they're 5-to-1 or more. But what probably happened, and what Talbot didn't really go into, is that as he insisted on those minimum odds of 5-to-1, his winning percentage went down, and very likely his ROI got even worse. So let's take a look, first of all, at the morning line favorites. And what I did is I took a look at my own database at races where there was no favored entry. That just kind of helped to solidify the data so you weren't getting, you know, kind of a crossover effect. And we're going to take a look at horses here that are the morning line favorite and take a look at the numbers. And you see that it's fairly similar to what you could expect by betting the post-time favorite. So not bad. Now, take a look at what happens when I insist that the morning line favorite be an overlay. In other words, going to post at odds higher than its morning line. Still the morning line favorite, but just going to post as an overlay. You notice that not only does the percentage of winners just go completely awry, but take a look at the ROI as well. It also decreases greatly. And that is typical of what happens when players start insisting on minimum odds without any kind of backup studies. So now we're going to take a look at some of my win factor report fair odds plays. Now what I did here is I looked at just good betting races, or races rated 75% or higher. These are the kinds of races that I find to be more consistent. Now you notice here that the ROI, when you're just looking at all the top contenders in bettable races, not that great. Not much better than playing favorites. But look at what happens when you insist on overlays. You notice that in this case, the winning percentage still goes down, but the ROI actually turns positive. That is what you're looking for from a good fair odds line, and that's what fair odds is all about. So we're going to take a look at a race at River Downs on Saturday, June 19th of 2010, and I'm going to try to demonstrate this principle about how I go about adjusting the odds and so forth. Let's start our analysis with the number 1 horse. This is a horse who's got a name that my kids would love, Booger Street. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. But nonetheless, this is a horse that is 6-to-1 on the morning line. 6-to-1, you'll notice, on my win factor report, computerized fair odds line. So what I try to do now is simply validate that line. Now, typically, if the computerized fair odds match the morning line, I feel fairly comfortable that that's probably the right number. But let's take a closer look at Booger Street here, or Booger Street. It's hard to say that name with a straight face. But you'll notice that in his route tries, he's been absolutely horrendous. Hasn't been beaten by anything approaching a reasonable margin. And if you look at his breeding, that kind of adds fuel to the fire that this horse is not a router, because both his sire and his dam have dosage indexes, or DIs, greater than 4.00. So this is a horse that I would consider upping those fair odds to maybe 8-to-1, 10-to-1, or whatever. We don't really know yet because we haven't looked at the rest of the field. Maybe the rest of the field is just as bad. But this is not a horse that I'm real excited about in any event. Now let's take a look at the number 2 horse, Run Gima Run. Interesting thing here. This horse is 12-to-1 on the morning line, and you'll note that both of his wins were wire-to-wire. But here's the amazing thing. His trainer, 0 for 71 with horses that went to post at 10 to 1 or greater. And it looks like that's exactly the case with Run Gima Run, because you've got a big favorite in here, a very likely big favorite in this field. So it's very probable that Run Gima Run is going to go to post at odds of 10 to 1 or greater, and certainly his trainer has not had any success. And then if you look at the horse's past performances, the last race, not that bad, but the LSRs aren't that great. This is a horse that I could see hitting the board, but there's not a whole lot of selling points here in terms of Run Gima Run, and you've got fair odds of 8 to 1 on my win factor line, 12 to 1 on the morning line. Now here's where I start to do my evaluations. Is Run Gima Run better than Booger Street? Yeah, I think so. And what would I make the fair odds on Run Gima Run? Well, right now, I would probably just do an average of the morning line and my fair odds and get 10 to 1. Therefore, at a bare minimum, I've probably got Booger Street, I can't even say the name, 12 to 1 at least. So now let's go to the number 3 horse. This is Miss Ego. Now this horse on my win factor line is 12 to 1. The morning line is 6 to 1. Another horse that really hasn't done a whole lot. Now she does have, or he does, I guess it is a she. She does have a fairly reasonable dosage index of 1.22. That's actually route breeding. But you look at that last race LSR, a minus 26. Not too excited about this horse. I'm probably going to go with my computerized line in this case and look at about 12 to 1. Where does that compare to Booger Street? Well, again, we probably push those odds up on the one horse or keep them the same. I think Booger Street and Miss Ego are about the same, so I would say 12 to 1 on both of them for right now. That brings us up to the number 4 horse, and that is Magic de Nascra. Now here we get to our first legitimate contender. If you take a look at the LSRs, pretty good. In fact, that last race, very good. Do keep in mind that it was on turf, and the turf LSRs typically are lower or better than the dirt LSRs. If you wanted to make them comparable, subtract 5 points from that LSR. But you'll notice that's still a good figure for this field. And Magic de Nascra has run some good races in the past, has some decent buyer figures in the past. The amazing thing is that this horse is 5 years old and still a maiden, and I'm saying that he's a prime contender in this $50,000 race for Alabama bred. So it gives you an idea exactly how bad this field is. Now, on my win factor line, we've got Magic Nascra, I believe, at 4 to 1. That is the price. 3 to 1 on the morning line. I would go less than 4 to 1, just given what I've seen from these other horses so far. Maybe even make this horse 5 to 2, but 3 to 1 I think is probably a reasonable price on Magic de Nascra. So now we're up to the number 5 horse. That is Lovely Crown. This horse really hasn't done much of anything. 12 to 1 on the morning line. Lovely Crown is 15 to 1 on my fair odds line. Probably be more partial to the 15 to 1 in this case. Again, if you look at those past performances, none of them in this field have looked good, but Lovely Crown looks even worse than some of the ones we've seen already. Because one thing that's going for Booger Street is the fact that he could get the early lead. That might make him a little braver. Is it going to make him win this race? I sincerely doubt it, but it could make him a little bit tougher. Now, of course, we come to the big favorite. This is number 6, I Can. Now, when I first looked at this race, of course, I really looked at it because I wanted to beat a 4 to 5 favorite in a cheap race for Alabama breds. But boy, when you look at the figures, that's going to be tough to do. You'll notice that I Can, first of all, is making the third start, or his third start, off of a layoff. The LSRs are improving. He won this race last year by 18.5 lengths. His buyer in that race, a 75, was about 6.5 lengths better than the best buyer that any of these horses have ever run. So he's got a lot of advantages going for him. As I said, 4 to 5 on the morning line. Now he's 7 to 5 on my win factor line. So which is it? 7 to 5 or 4 to 5? Well, given what we've seen in this field, I think 4 to 5 is far more reasonable, and I could even make a case for 3 to 5 or even lower than that. Now here's the thing. He's 3 to 5, he's 4 to 5, whatever you want to make him in this field, that doesn't mean that he's unbeatable. He could fall. His jockey could fall. A myriad of things could happen. He's not a good horse. He could just run a clunker. And keep in mind that 6.5 lengths is about a second. Boom. That's a second. So that's the difference in ability that we're talking about, and that's a dominant difference. So we're not talking about a lot. This is not a super horse.